I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, my hands trembling as I gripped the pregnancy test. 2 pink lines, positive. My heart raced as I tried to process this life-changing news. How would I tell Chris? As if on cue, I heard the front door open. "Nora? You home?" Chris called out. I quickly shoved the test into my pocket and splashed some water on my face. "In here," I managed to reply, my voice shakier than I'd intended. Chris appeared in the doorway, his face etched with worry. "Everything okay? You look pale." I forced a smile. "Just feeling a bit under the weather. How was your interview?" He ran a hand through his hair, a telltale sign of stress. "It was interesting. Can we talk?" We moved to the living room, settling onto our worn couch. Chris took a deep breath. "They offered me the job." "That's great news," I exclaimed, genuinely happy for him after a year of fruitless job hunting. His expression remained serious. "There's a catch, Nora. The position is in Seattle." My stomach dropped. "Seattle? But that's across the country. Our whole life is here, my art studio, our friends, your family." I know, Chris said, reaching for my hand, "but this is a fantastic opportunity. The salary is double what I was making before, and there's room for growth." I pulled away, standing up to pace the room. "What about my career? I've just started to build a name for myself in the local art scene." Chris's eyes pleaded with me. "You can paint anywhere, Nora, and with this salary, we could afford a house with a dedicated studio space for you." I felt torn. The pregnancy test weighed heavily in my pocket, a secret that would change everything. "I don't know, Chris. It's such a big decision." "We don't have to decide right this second," he said, his voice gentle, "but they need an answer by the end of the week." Just then, a cry erupted from the baby monitor. Our daughter, Lily, was awake from her nap. "I'll get her," Chris offered, standing up. As he left the room, I sank back onto the couch, my mind reeling. How could I uproot our entire life? But how could I ask Chris to turn down this opportunity after struggling for so long? When Chris returned with Lily, her chubby arms reached out for me. I took her, breathing in her sweet baby scent. "Mama sad?" Lily asked, her big blue eyes studying my face. I kissed her forehead. "No, sweetheart, Mama's just thinking." Chris sat beside us, his arm around my shoulders. "We're a team, Nora. Whatever we decide, we'll do it together." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. How could I tell him about the baby now? It would only complicate things further. "I have an idea," Chris said suddenly. "Why don't we take a drive to that little bed and breakfast we love? We can spend the weekend there, talk things through without any distractions." The thought of escaping, even for a couple of days, was tempting. What about Lily? My mom's been begging for some grandma time. I'm sure she'd be thrilled to watch her. I hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, let's do it." As Chris made the arrangements, I excused myself to the bathroom. I pulled out the pregnancy test, staring at those 2 pink lines that had the power to change everything. How could I tell Chris now, with this job offer hanging over us? And how could I not? My mind raced with the possibilities, each scenario more daunting than the last. One thing was certain, this weekend getaway would be anything but relaxing. The moving truck rumbled away, leaving us standing in front of our new home in Seattle. Rain drizzled down, matching my mood perfectly. Chris squeezed my hand, his excitement palpable. "This is it, Nora, our fresh start." I forced a smile, my free hand resting on my now visible baby bump. "It's different." As we walked up the driveway, a voice called out, "Welcome to the neighborhood." A statuesque blonde in yoga pants jogged towards us, all smiles and bouncing ponytail. "I'm Angela, your next-door neighbor." Chris stepped forward, extending his hand. "Chris, this is my wife, Nora, and our daughter, Lily." Angela's eyes lingered on Chris a beat too long before turning to me. "Oh, and another one on the way. How exciting!" I nodded, suddenly feeling frumpy in my travel-worn clothes. "We're due in 4 months." "Well, if you need anything at all, I'm right next door," Angela said, her hand on Chris's arm. "Anything at all." As she jogged away, Chris chuckled. "Friendly neighbors. That's a good sign, right?" I mumbled agreement, but something about Angela's overly warm welcome left me uneasy. The next few weeks flew by in a whirlwind of unpacking and settling in. Chris threw himself into his new job, often working late. I struggled to find my footing, missing my old art studio and friends. One afternoon, while Lily napped, a knock at the door startled me. It was Angela, holding a plate of cookies. "Thought you might need a pick-me-up," she said, breezing past me into the kitchen. How are you settling in? I followed, feeling oddly defensive in my own home. Fine, thanks. Chris is loving his new job. Angela's eyes sparkled. Oh, I know. We had lunch yesterday. He's quite the charmer, isn't he? My stomach clenched. You had lunch? Just a quick bite in the cafeteria, she waved dismissively. Did he not mention it? Anyway, there's a neighborhood barbecue this weekend. You simply must come. After she left, I stood in the kitchen, Angela's words echoing in my mind. Why hadn't Chris mentioned lunch? That evening, as we ate dinner, I casually asked, How's work going? Meet any new people? Chris nodded, mouthful of pasta. It's great. Everyone's been really welcoming. I waited, but he didn't elaborate. Anyone in particular? He shrugged. Not really. Oh, did I mention there's a company picnic coming up? I set down my fork. Actually, Angela invited us to a neighborhood barbecue. Same day, probably. Chris's face lit up. Perfect. We can do both. The picnic's in the afternoon. We can hit the barbecue after. I pushed my food around my plate. You seem awfully excited about the barbecue. He reached across the table, taking my hand. I'm excited about making friends here, Nora. This move was hard on all of us. I want it to work. I nodded, guilt washing over me. Was I being paranoid? The barbecue arrived, and I found myself surrounded by Angela's friends. They were all impossibly fit, sipping wine and trading neighborhood gossip. Oh, Nora, one woman said, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. It must be so hard being pregnant in a new city, and with Chris working such long hours. Another chimed in. At least he has Angela to keep him company at work. She's such a dear, always looking out for the new employees. My head snapped up. What do you mean? The women exchanged glances. Oh, nothing, dear. It's just nice that he has a friendly face at the office. I scanned the yard, spotting Chris and Angela by the grill, laughing at some private joke. As I watched, she placed her hand on his arm, leaning in close to whisper something. A cold dread settled in my stomach. What was really going on here? As we drove home that night, Chris chatted happily about the new friends we'd made. I stared out the window, my mind racing. Nora? You okay? Chris asked, concern in his voice. I turned to him, searching his face. Chris, is there something you're not telling me? Chris's face paled at my question. What do you mean? I've told you everything. I wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at me. It's just... You and Angela seem awfully close. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Nora, she's just being friendly. You're reading too much into this. I let it drop, but sleep eluded me that night. The next morning, while Chris was in the shower, I did something I'd never done before. I checked his phone. My hands shook as I scrolled through his messages. There it was, a thread with Angela. My heart raced as I opened it. Great seeing you today. Lunch again tomorrow? Absolutely. Same time, same place. Can't wait. You always brighten my day. I felt sick. The messages weren't explicitly romantic, but the familiarity, the frequency, it was all wrong. Chris's footsteps approached. I quickly put the phone down, my mind reeling. Hey, honey, he said, kissing my cheek. I'm heading out. Big presentation today. I nodded, unable to meet his eyes. Good luck, I managed to choke out. As soon as he left, I burst into tears. Lily toddled over, her little face scrunched with concern. Mama sad? I pulled her close, breathing in her sweet baby scent. No, sweetheart. Mama's okay. But I wasn't okay. Far from it. That afternoon, I took Lily to the park, desperate for a distraction. As she played in the sandbox, I sat on a nearby bench, lost in thought. Mind if I join you? I looked up to see an older woman with kind eyes and silver hair. Please, I gestured to the empty seat. I'm Marianne, she said, settling beside me. You look like you could use a friendly ear. Something about her warmth broke through my defenses. Before I knew it, I was pouring out the whole story. The move, Angela, the text messages. Marianne listened without judgment, her eyes filled with understanding. When I finished, she took my hand. Oh, honey, I've been where you are. What did you do? I asked, desperate for guidance. She smiled sadly. I ignored it, convinced myself I was imagining things. Don't make my mistake, Nora. Trust your instincts. As we talked, Lily ran over, proudly showing off a handful of pebbles. Marianne's face lit up. What a beautiful collection. You must be so proud of your mommy. Lily beamed, then ran back to play. Marianne turned to me, her expression serious. Whatever you decide to do, remember, you're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for her, too. Her words struck a chord. I thought of the baby growing inside me, of Lily's innocent face. They deserved better than this. But how can I be sure? I asked, voicing my deepest fear. Marianne squeezed my hand. You dig deeper, gather evidence, and when you know for certain, you act. That night, after putting Lily to bed, I sat at the kitchen table, Chris's phone in my hands. He was working late again, or so he said. With trembling fingers, I opened his location history. My breath caught as I saw an unfamiliar address, visited multiple times over the past weeks. I grabbed my car keys, determination overriding my fear. It was time to see for myself. The address led me to a small apartment complex. As I pulled up, I saw Chris's car parked outside. My heart pounded as I approached the building. Through a ground-floor window, I saw them, Chris and Angela, sitting close on a couch, laughing over glasses of wine. I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. It was real. It was all real. As I drove home, tears blurring my vision, one thought echoed in my mind: what am I going to do now? The annual company picnic loomed, and I dreaded every second of it. But I had to go. I needed to see Chris and Angela together with my own eyes. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe there was an innocent explanation for everything. As we arrived at the park, Chris squeezed my hand. You okay? You've been quiet lately. I forced a smile. Just tired. The pregnancy, you know. He nodded, distracted by something over my shoulder. Oh, there's Angela. I promised I'd help her set up the volleyball net. Before I could respond, he was gone, jogging towards that familiar blonde ponytail. I watched as they laughed together, their bodies in perfect sync as they worked. Mama, swing! Lily tugged at my hand, pulling me towards the playground. As I pushed Lily on the swing, my eyes never left Chris and Angela. They were always near each other, sharing private jokes, touching casually. It was like watching a dance I wasn't part of. Your husband seems close with Angela, a voice beside me said. It was one of the women from the neighborhood barbecue. I stiffened. They're just colleagues. She raised an eyebrow. If you say so, dear, but if I were you, I'd keep a closer eye on them. Anger flared in my chest. How dare she? But as I opened my mouth to retort, I realized she was right. I needed to know the truth, once and for all. As the afternoon wore on, I lost sight of Chris. Panic rose in my throat. Where was he? Where was Angela? Lisa, can you watch Lily for a minute? I asked another mom. I need to find Chris. I searched the crowded park, my heart pounding. Then I saw them, ducking behind a storage shed at the far end of the field. Without thinking, I followed. As I approached, I heard Angela's lilting laugh. Oh, Chris, you're terrible. You love it, Chris's voice replied, low and intimate. I peered around the corner of the shed, and my world shattered. Chris had Angela pressed against the wall, his lips on her neck, her hands tangled in his hair. A strangled gasp escaped me. They sprang apart, guilt written all over their faces. Nora? Chris exclaimed, his face pale. It's not. This isn't. But I was already running, tears blurring my vision. I heard Chris calling after me, but I didn't stop. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I found myself at the playground, scooping up a confused Lily. We're going home, baby, I choked out. But Daddy? She asked, looking around. Daddy's busy, I said, my voice breaking. As I buckled Lily into her car seat, Chris caught up to us. Nora, please, let me explain. I whirled on him, fury and pain coursing through me. Explain what, Chris? How you've been lying to me? How you've been sneaking around with her? He reached for me, but I jerked away. Don't touch me. Don't you dare touch me. It was a mistake, he pleaded. It didn't mean anything. I love you, Nora. You and Lily are my world. I laughed bitterly. Your world? Is that why you've been spending every spare moment with her? Chris's face crumpled. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, can we talk about this? We can fix this. For a moment, I wavered. I thought of our life together, of Lily, of the baby on the way, but then I remembered the sight of him with Angela, and my resolve hardened. I don't know if we can fix this, Chris, I said, my voice cold. I don't know if I want to. As I drove away, leaving Chris standing alone in the parking lot, 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. What would I do now? How would I tell Lily? Could I raise 2 children on my own? But beneath the fear and uncertainty, a small voice whispered, You're stronger than you know. You can do this. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, a plan already forming in my mind. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I hadn't slept in days. Chris's desperate calls and messages went unanswered as I grappled with the shattered pieces of my life. Lily's confused tears only deepened my anguish. How could I explain that Daddy wasn't coming home? One particularly rough morning, I found myself back at the park, hoping the fresh air might clear my head. Lily was with my mother, giving me a rare moment alone. "Nora?" A familiar voice called. It was Marianne, the kind older woman I'd met before. "Oh, honey, you look like you've been through hell." The sympathy in her eyes broke something in me. Before I knew it, I was sobbing, pouring out the whole sordid story between gasps. Marianne listened, her face a mix of compassion and anger. When I finished, she took my hands in hers. "You're stronger than you realize, Nora, but you need to be smart about this." "What do you mean?" I asked, wiping my eyes. She leaned in, her voice low. "Men like Chris, they're good at spinning tales. You need hard evidence before you make any decisions." I shook my head. "I saw them together. What more evidence do I need? For yourself? Nothing. But for a divorce, for custody, you need more." Marianne's eyes hardened. "I made the mistake of confronting my ex-husband without proof. He turned it all around on me, made me doubt myself. I won't let that happen to you." Her words sent a chill through me. "What should I do?" "Dig deeper," she said firmly. "Get into his email, his bank statements, follow him if you have to, and don't let on that you know anything." The thought of pretending everything was normal made me sick. "I don't know if I can face him." Marianne squeezed my hand. "You can, and you will, for Lily and for that baby you're carrying. They deserve better, and so do you." As I drove home, Marianne's advice echoed in my mind. Could I really play the role of the unsuspecting wife? The thought of Chris touching me, kissing me, while I knew about Angela, made my skin crawl. But as I walked into our house, the house we'd chosen together, filled with memories and dreams, resolve steeled my spine. I would do whatever it took to protect my children and myself. That evening, when Chris came home, I forced myself to greet him with a smile. "Hi, honey. How was work?" The relief on his face was palpable. It was, "Good. Nora, can we talk?" I nodded, my heart racing. "Of course." We sat on the couch, an ocean of unspoken words between us. Chris took a deep breath. "About what happened at the picnic, it was a horrible mistake. Angela means nothing to me. You and Lily are everything." I wanted to scream, to throw his lies back in his face. Instead, I said softly, "I overreacted. I've been so emotional with the pregnancy. Can we just start over?" The hope that bloomed in Chris's eyes made me want to vomit. He pulled me into a hug, murmuring apologies and promises. Over his shoulder, my eyes fell on a framed photo of us with Lily, my beautiful, innocent daughter, my unborn child. They deserved the truth, whatever it might be. In that moment, I made my decision. I would play along, gather evidence, and when the time was right, I would bring it all crashing down. As Chris held me, thinking all was forgiven, I began to plan. I would leave no stone unturned, no secret unexposed. And when I was done, Chris and Angela would regret ever underestimating me. The game was on, and I intended to win. The next few weeks were a masterclass in deception. I played the role of the forgiving wife perfectly, all while gathering evidence with Marianne's help. We combed through bank statements, tracked Chris's movements, and even hired a private investigator. One rainy afternoon, Marianne and I huddled over my laptop, sifting through the latest batch of information from the PI. "Look at this." Marianne pointed to a series of transactions. Regular withdrawals, always the same amount, always on Fridays. My heart sank. "The day he claims to work late." Marianne squeezed my hand. "We've got him, Nora. Now we just need the final piece of evidence." As if on cue, my phone buzzed. It was a text from the PI. "Meeting confirmed. Sending location now." I stood up, adrenaline coursing through me. "This is it. I'm going." Marianne looked concerned. "Are you sure? I could go instead." I shook my head. "No, I need to see this with my own eyes." The drive to the motel was a blur. Rain lashed against the windshield, matching the storm in my heart. I parked across the street, my eyes fixed on room 12. At exactly 7 p.m., a familiar car pulled up. Chris stepped out, looking around furtively before knocking on the door. Angela answered, pulling him inside. I felt numb. Even after everything, a part of me had hoped it wasn't true. I raised my phone, capturing video of Chris entering the room. Suddenly, a tap on my window made me jump. It was the PI, gesturing for me to roll down the window. "Mrs. Thompson, I've got audio set up in the room. Do you want to listen?" I hesitated, then nodded. He handed me a small device with headphones. Chris's voice came through clearly. "I can't keep doing this, Angela. Nora's pregnant." I need to focus on my family. Angela's laugh was cold. Oh, please, you've been saying that for months. Face it, Chris, you're not happy with her. You never have been. That's not true, Chris protested weakly. Then why are you here? Angela challenged. There was a long pause, then the unmistakable sound of kissing. I ripped off the headphones, bile rising in my throat. I'd heard enough. As I drove home, my mind raced. I had all the evidence I needed now. But what would I do with it? Marianne was waiting when I got back. One look at my face told her everything. Oh, honey, she said, pulling me into a hug. I'm so sorry. As I recounted what I'd seen and heard, Marianne's expression hardened. He doesn't deserve you, Nora. It's time to take back your life. But how? I asked, feeling lost. A quiet divorce? Try to keep it civil for Lily's sake? Marianne shook her head. No. Men like Chris, they need to be exposed. Publicly. It's the only way they learn. Her words ignited something in me. Years of suppressed anger, of putting everyone else first, of dimming my own light. It all came rushing to the surface. You're right, I said, my voice stronger than I'd heard it in months. No more hiding. No more pretending. It's time everyone knew the truth. Marianne smiled, a glint of satisfaction in her eyes. That's my girl. Now let's plan this out properly. We want maximum impact. As we strategized late into the night, a part of me wondered if this was too far. Was public humiliation really the answer? But then I thought of Lily, of the baby I was carrying. I thought of all the women who had been in my shoes, who had suffered in silence. No more. It was time to reclaim my voice, my power, my life. As Marianne and I finalized our plan, I felt a mix of exhilaration and terror. In just a few days, everything would change. There was no going back now. I placed a hand on my growing belly, whispering a promise. We're going to be okay. Mama's going to make sure of it. The annual neighborhood block party was in full swing. Families mingled, kids ran around with sticky faces, and the air was thick with the smell of barbecue. I stood on the periphery, my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. Marianne appeared at my side, a reassuring presence. Are you ready? I nodded, unable to speak. In my hand, I clutched a USB drive containing all the evidence of Chris and Angela's affair. Photos, videos, bank statements, everything. Chris was at the grill playing the role of perfect husband and neighbor. Angela hovered nearby, laughing too loudly at his jokes. The sight of them together made my blood boil. Remember, Marianne whispered, wait for my signal. I watched as she made her way to the makeshift stage where the karaoke machine was set up. She tapped the microphone, drawing everyone's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, Marianne announced, we have a special presentation from our very own Nora Thompson. This was it, my moment of truth. As I walked to the stage, Chris caught my eye. He smiled, oblivious to what was about to happen. I felt a flicker of doubt. Was I really going to do this? Then I saw Angela place her hand on Chris's arm, and my resolve hardened. I plugged in the USB drive and grabbed the microphone. I have a story to tell you all, I began, my voice shaky but gaining strength. A story about betrayal, lies, and the importance of truth. The crowd fell silent, sensing the gravity in my tone. Chris's smile faltered. For months I've been living a lie, I continued, pretending everything was fine while my husband carried on an affair with our neighbor. Gasps rippled through the audience. Chris's face drained of color. Angela tried to slip away, but Marianne blocked her path. I have proof, I said, pressing play on the first video. Chris and Angela's voices filled the air, discussing their secret meetings. The crowd watched in stunned silence as image after image appeared on the screen. Chris entering the motel. Bank statements showing his withdrawals. Text messages full of intimate details. I locked eyes with Chris. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Did you think I was too stupid, too trusting? He started towards the stage. Nora, please. No, I shouted, surprising even myself with the force of my voice. You don't get to speak now. You've done enough talking behind my back. As the evidence continued to play, I saw the reactions around me. Shock, disgust, pity. Angela had collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Chris stood frozen, his world crumbling around him. But then I heard a small voice. Mommy? Lily stood at the edge of the crowd, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. My triumph turned to ash in my mouth. What had I done? I stumbled off the stage, pushing past the murmuring crowd to reach my daughter. As I scooped her up, I caught sight of Chris. The devastation on his face mirrored my own. Nora, he choked out, I'm so sorry. Please, can we talk? But it was too late. The damage was done. As I carried Lily away from the chaos, Marianne caught up with us. "You did it, Nora. You showed them all?" "No," I cut her off, the weight of my actions crashing down on me. "This wasn't right. Not like this." Marianne's expression hardened. "Don't go soft now. He deserved this." I looked at Lily, clinging to me in confusion, then back at the devastation I'd left behind. Maybe he did, but Lily didn't, and neither did I. As we walked away from the party, the sounds of shock and gossip fading behind us, I realized the bitter truth. In my quest for revenge, I'd hurt the very people I was trying to protect. The triumph I'd imagined felt hollow. Instead of closure, I was left with a gnawing question. What do I do now? The days following the block party were a blur of tears, hushed conversations, and sleepless nights. Chris moved out, staying with a friend. I was left alone with Lily, trying to explain why Daddy wasn't home. One afternoon, as Lily napped, I sat in my makeshift art studio, staring at a blank canvas. For the first time in years, I felt the urge to paint. As I picked up a brush, there was a knock at the door. It was Chris, looking haggard and remorseful. "Can we talk?" I nodded, letting him in. We sat at the kitchen table, the weight of our broken marriage between us. "I'm so sorry, Nora," Chris began, his voice cracking. "What I did was unforgivable. I understand if you want a divorce." I took a deep breath. I thought I did, but seeing Lily's face that day, it made me realize revenge isn't the answer. Chris looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we owe it to Lily and to this baby." I placed a hand on my swollen belly, "to try and work through this. But things have to change, Chris. I won't be taken for granted again." We talked for hours, laying everything bare. Chris's insecurities about providing for the family, my resentment at giving up my art, the breakdown in our communication. It was painful, but cathartic. "I want to go to counseling," I said firmly. "Both of us, together and separately, and I'm going back to painting. It's not negotiable." Chris nodded eagerly. "Anything you want. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." As we talked, I felt a shift within me. The anger that had consumed me for so long began to ebb, replaced by a sense of empowerment. I wasn't just Chris's wife or Lily's mother. I was Nora, artist, woman, survivor. Weeks turned into months. Chris threw himself into therapy, taking on more responsibilities at home. I set up a proper studio and started selling my paintings online. Slowly, we rebuilt trust. One evening, as we tucked Lily into bed, she asked, "Are you and Daddy happy now?" I looked at Chris, seeing the man I fell in love with, changed but somehow stronger. "We're working on it, sweetie, every day." As her due date approached, Nora found herself in her studio, working on a new piece. It was a self-portrait, not the meek housewife she'd become, but the strong, resilient woman she'd discovered. Chris appeared in the doorway, a mug of tea in hand. "That's incredible, Nora. It's so you." I smiled, really smiled for the first time in months. "It is, isn't it?" He set the tea down and wrapped his arms around me, careful of my belly. "I'm so proud of you and grateful you gave us another chance." I leaned into him, feeling our baby kick. "We've both changed, Chris. This isn't the life I imagined, but maybe it's the one we needed." As I put the finishing touches on my self-portrait, I realized that this, the messy, complicated, beautiful life we were rebuilding, was my masterpiece. The next day, I received an email from a gallery in the city. They wanted to feature my work in an upcoming show. As I shared the news with Chris, watching his face light up with genuine pride, I knew we'd be okay. Not perfect, but okay. That night, as we lay in bed, Chris's hand on my belly, I thought about the journey we'd been on. The pain, the betrayal, the near destruction of everything we'd built. But I also thought about the strength I'd found, the voice I'd reclaimed. I wasn't just Chris's wife or Lily's mother anymore. I was Nora Thompson, artist, survivor, woman reborn. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, I knew I had the strength to face them, not just for my family, but for myself. The canvas of our life wasn't perfect. It had its dark spots, its messy streaks, but it was ours, and it was beautiful in its own way. And I, Nora Thompson, was the artist holding the brush. "How dare you show your face here?" I hissed, as soon as I caught sight of Alex sauntering towards me across the school parking lot. My hands clenched by my sides, nails digging into my palms. Alex slid his sunglasses down his nose, his mouth curling into a satisfied smirk. Well, if it isn't my darling ex-wife Meredith, you're looking tired. His gaze raked down my body. I refused to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. What do you want, Alex? Can't I walk my daughter into school? He mocked offense. Our daughter Lila peered at Alex from behind me, unimpressed. She was wise beyond her 7 years when it came to her father. You didn't even call her on her birthday last week, I said sharply. So let's drop the devoted dad act. Alex's smirk faded. Before he could retort, a sleek black SUV pulled up beside us. The driver's door swung open and Ethan stepped out, tall and impeccably dressed. I felt a rush of relief at the sight of my husband. Everything okay here? Ethan asked mildly as he moved to stand beside me. Lila immediately went to him for a hug. Alex's lip curled derisively. Oh, look, your white knight has arrived with his fancy new car. Too bad money can't buy taste or erase your seedy past. Ethan tensed, but a warning glance from me made him hold his tongue. I refused to indulge Alex's juvenile jabs about Ethan's privileged background, not that it was any business of his. You should leave, I said coldly. Instead, Alex gestured at Ethan's SUV with its Delmont Foods logo. I see you clawed your way to the top after all. Then again, sleeping with the boss has always been your specialty, hasn't it, Meredith? Red-hot anger flooded me. How dare Alex throw cheap accusations at me when he was the one who had destroyed our marriage? But before I could spit out a furious retort, Ethan gently squeezed my shoulder. Actually, I'm not an employee. Ethan's voice was calm and steady. I was just named CEO last month when my father retired, so technically, this is now my company. Utter shock flashed across Alex's face. It gave me a rush of vicious satisfaction to realize he'd never known Ethan came from one of the wealthiest families in the state, inheriting a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Alex had only ever seen him as another junior executive at Delmont. You... Alex's mouth opened and closed, uncharacteristically lost for words. Ethan gave a thin smile. Yes, my trust fund alone could buy and sell you a dozen times over. Not that I make a habit of flaunting my family money. He flicked a piece of lint off his impeccably tailored suit. I just wanted to make one thing very clear, Alex. You are not welcome here. This school, this town, it's my territory now. Stay away from my family, or you'll regret it. Alex paled, shrinked back. Without another word, he turned and hurried away across the parking lot. I let out a long breath as we watched his retreating figure. Well then, Ethan slipped an arm around me. I'd say that's enough drama for one morning. Despite everything, I found myself smiling. No matter what storms we weathered, as long as I had Ethan by my side, I knew I could survive anything Alex tried to throw our way. When Ethan said he wanted to grab coffee after dropping Lila off at school, I readied myself for the talk I knew was coming. Ethan took a long sip of his latte, then set it down and turned to face me. So, you and Alex, and me too for that matter, all worked at Delmont Foods when you met, and the rest is history. The very short version of history, I said softly. Well, let me tell you a quick story on my end. Ethan leaned back, holding my gaze with his steady, pale eyes. You started as an assistant about 6 months before I rolled up from California, another recent MBA grad hotshot, hungry for my first real corporate job. One day the CEO himself takes me out on the Delmont yacht as a perk. And there you were in this tiny bikini. I felt myself flush at the memory. My God, how young and foolish I'd been. Barely 26, vainly trying to land a higher-up boyfriend and climbing up the food giant that was Delmont. Honestly, Meredith, I liked you immediately. You were smart, scrappy, vivacious. Ethan shrugged, almost shyly. But I could also tell you were unavailable. A few discreet questions revealed you were dating hotshot young marketing exec Alex Karev. I winced inwardly at Alex's name. How naive I'd been back then, too, imaging us the perfect corporate power couple. If only I could travel back and warn my past self not to ignore all the red flags. Anyway, I tried to move on and focus on my own career, Ethan went on. But, funny enough, here we are 10 years later, exes with Alex and married instead to each other. Ethan raised an eyebrow, softening his words with a wry smile. I chuckled despite the maelstrom of emotions stirred up by this stroll down memory lane. Here we are indeed. Who could have predicted this is where life would take us? I reached across to squeeze his arm. Lucky me, though. Ethan covered my hand gently. I like to think we both got lucky in round 2, Mir. His voice turned somber. But now I think it's time you told me what really went down between you and Alex. I sighed, old hurts rising up from long-buried depths. Honestly, Ethan, I don't know if I have the full story even now. He changed, slowly at first, stayed out more for drinks with the guys, networked aggressively like his life depended on it. I was scrambling to build my own career too, though, so maybe I just didn't want to see the signs. I shook my head at my own willful blindness. Back then, I just wanted the success, the status, the money. I was willing to ignore too much in exchange for that glittering dream. In hindsight, he was clearly cheating on me for months before I caught him with his assistant. I swallowed hard. It was the biggest cliché punch in the gut, and I wasn't even that shocked, just numb at my own stupidity. "Oh, Meredith." Ethan's voice was gentle. "Don't blame yourself. Alex made those choices." I wanted to make it work at first. I stared into my coffee, remembering those wretched attempts to salvage things as Alex grew ever more brazen with his affair. But when I got pregnant unexpectedly with Lila, it pushed me over the edge. I filed for divorce when I was 8 months along. Ethan blew out a long breath, shaking his head. Well, now Alex popping up again makes more sense. Unfinished business simmering under the surface. I nodded wearily. In my heart, I knew this was only the beginning. Alex's ego would drive him to keep needling old wounds, trying to tear down the happier life I'd built without him. Well, I was more than ready for the fight now. Alex had no idea what he was provoking. My hands shook as I quietly closed Lila's bedroom door, her sobs still echoing in my ears. At 6 years old, she'd just learned the hard truth. Her father didn't want her anymore. I still wasn't sure what had prompted Alex to suddenly file for full custody. Leila had come home from his weekend visit utterly distraught, clutching the court notice. She'd always been an afterthought for Alex at best, so why this sudden strategic move against me now? I stepped out the front door for air, nausea and anger battling inside me. As if conjured by my despair, a sleek sports car purred up the street right then, gliding to a stop at the curb just beyond my driveway. Jenna. Of course, Alex's blonde assistant turned mistress had come to gloat. I strode up to her lowered window, fury overriding my disgust. "Well, hello there, Meredith." Jenna purred, snapping her gum. "Long time no see." Her smug gaze traveled over my worn yoga pants and faded hoodie. "Rough day? Cut the crap." I crossed my arms, refusing to let her see me ruffled. "I'm guessing you're behind this latest stunt from Alex. Does his wife know you're running around town doing his dirty work?" Jenna scowled, dropping her faux-friendly act. "Good. Maybe if you weren't such a shitty mom, Alex wouldn't have to step in for the sake of your daughter," she snapped spitefully. Red hazed my vision. Without thinking, I reached in and snatched the sunglasses off her surgically perfected nose. "Listen very closely, you plastic little homewrecker." My voice lashed like a whip as I leaned down to get in her face. "You both may have money and connections, but I have everything to lose, and that makes me dangerous." I crushed her $100 shades in my fist. "Now get the hell out of my neighborhood before you regret it." Jenna shrank away, for once stunned silent. I stepped back and let her peel off in a squeal of tires. As her taillights disappeared from sight, the red rage seeped away, leaving me drained and hollow. I trudged back inside with leaden limbs, pausing as my eyes landed on the pile of legal documents awaiting my response. Even just glancing at the logo for Alex's law firm kicked my heart rate up again. This was bad. Alex had the fancy lawyers and privilege on his side. While I could barely scrape rent together some months, he clearly aimed to bury me in legal bills, grinding me down through attrition. Exhausted and beaten down by the day's events, I collapsed onto the couch and finally let the tears fall. Hugging a throw pillow to my chest, I let myself cry in heaving sobs. For Lila's innocence shattered too young, for the years and dreams I'd wasted on Alex, for the injustice of seeing bad people continuously rewarded while the good suffered undeserved misery. A quiet knock at the door startled me. Scrubbing hastily at my face, I peeked out to see Ethan on my doorstep, his expression full of concern. "Lila's teacher mentioned there was drama with Alex today and you left upset. I just wanted to come check on you both." He shuffled his feet. "I know I'm probably overstepping, but I had to make sure you were okay." A fresh sob rose in my throat at this kindness. I stepped back in a wordless invitation. Ethan hovered uncertainly just inside. I'm so sorry you're dealing with this crap from Alex now on top of everything else. His jaw tightened, a hard glint entering those soft blue eyes. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but sometimes karma takes too damn long with assholes like him. Despite everything, his vehemence surprised a watery chuckle from me. I sank back down onto the couch, suddenly beyond grateful not to be alone in this battle anymore. Thank you for coming by, Ethan. I really needed a friendly face tonight. I wiped my eyes, feeling the tiniest spark of hope flickering back to life inside me. And as for Alex, trust me, his karma is coming, one way or another. I tapped my foot impatiently against the courthouse floor, my nerves stretched thin. Any minute now, I expected to hear the click of Alex's designer shoes stalking up the hall, flanked by his army of suits. But the footsteps that approached were slower, more measured. I looked up and, to my astonishment, saw Ethan striding towards me, looking crisp and confident in a charcoal suit that had to cost more than my car. Ethan, what are you doing here? I stared at him, confused. Ever since becoming an unexpected shoulder for me to lean on these past few turbulent months, Ethan had been nothing short of a godsend. But I couldn't imagine why he'd turned up here today of all days. Wordlessly, Ethan held open the conference room door, gesturing for me to enter first. Bewildered, I stepped inside. My knees nearly buckled with relief at the sight of Lila laughing happily away on Izzy's lap. Alex's attorney sister had a soft spot for my daughter even amidst this legal crossfire. I rushed over, unable to resist sweeping Lila into a fierce hug. Over her shoulder, I shot Ethan a questioning look. He gave me a slow smile. I'm your new pro bono legal counsel. Surprise. What? How? I sank weakly down into a chair, dizzy with shock. Ethan sat beside me. I called in a favor from an old friend from my Harvard law days who owed me big time. Once I explained the situation with Alex trying to drown you in legal fees as retaliation, he was happy to help. Well, Iz and I decided to throw dear Alex a curveball this morning. Izzy smirked from across the table. Nothing screws up a bully's game plan like being utterly ignored. I glanced between them, almost giddy with relief. Having Izzy on my side had been a key advantage so far, but with Ethan's high-profile connections on board too, I felt unstoppable. Now, Ethan pulled out an intimidatingly thick folder of documents and turned to me with a smile. Let's talk about preempting every devious maneuver your ex may try. Don't worry about the legal bills anymore, Mir. I want to help protect you and Lila any way I can. His hand covered mine, warm and steadying. My heart gave an odd flutter. I tried to ignore the tiny inner voice pointing out all Ethan's attractive qualities, now amplified tenfold in a suit. There would be time later to analyze whatever was simmering between us lately. For now, I needed to focus on the fight ahead. All right, ladies, let's crush this. Izzy cracked her knuckles dramatically and winked at Lila. Auntie Izzy and Godfather Ethan have a bulletproof battle plan ready for the judge, so your mean old dad doesn't stand a chance. Lila's grin filled me with fierce determination. I would move heaven and earth before I let Alex torment my daughter for his petty games. Not when we finally had a real shot at a stable, happy future now, thanks to Ethan. I knew with bone-deep certainty that I could weather any coming storms with this man by my side. My premonition proved true over the whirlwind legal proceedings that followed. Just as Izzy predicted, Alex failed to make even a ripple fighting against the strategic duo of her and Ethan combined. At last came the bittersweet final signing of divorce papers I'd evaded completing for so long. My hand trembled slightly as I scrawled my name one last time as Meredith Kurev. Ethan's steadying grip on my shoulder kept me grounded. As we left the imposing courthouse doors for good, I tipped my face up to the brilliant sunlight with relief. The future lay ahead filled with promise. I could focus on Lila now, on my career, on exploring this surprising new connection with Ethan. The past could finally rest in peace. I turned to Ethan with joyful tears sparkling in my eyes. It's over. We're free. His answering smile outshone even the dazzling sunshine above. No, Meredith. He squeezed my hand, his own rare public display revealing the depth of emotion behind that reserved facade. This is only the beginning. As I hurried down the echoing corridor towards the principal's office, my heart pounded out a frantic beat. The urgent summons from Lila's school ignited all my worst fears, Had Alex overstepped his bounds and caused more trouble? I burst into the room, my stomach knotted into a tangled mess. But the sight behind the imposing oak desk left me speechless. Alex huddled on one chair, suit disheveled and sporting the beginnings of a black eye. Beside him sat Jenna, vainly trying to cover what looked suspiciously like a bite mark marring her exposed shoulder, and standing guard over them both with crossed arms and icy fury blazing in his blue eyes stood Ethan. "Good, you're finally here." Ethan's tone was clipped, a sure sign his anger still simmered below that polished executive surface. "Perhaps you can shed some light on exactly what happened at the playground today, because your ex-husband and his accomplice seem a little dazed on the details." It was only then I noticed Lila tucked against Ethan's side, looking tiny and stressed but physically unharmed. Overwhelming relief at seeing my baby girl uninjured temporarily muted my barrage of questions. I went straight to her and swept her into my arms. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" I pulled back to search her face worriedly. I rushed right over as soon as they called me. Lila's lower lip wobbled. "Aunt Jenna and Daddy came when me and Zoe were playing. They started yelling that Zoe's mom was a stupid lying lawyer," she sniffled. "Zoe cried and ran away. I got mad and bit Aunt Jenna." Her voice rose defiantly on the last line. I blinked, impressed despite myself at my daughter's bold defense of her friend. "Yes, and that was very wrong." Ethan smoothed down Lila's hair gently. "We don't settle fights with our teeth, even when protecting people we care about." He shot a reproving look at Jenna, who flushed and looked away. I stood, hands anchored on my hips. "Would someone please explain what the hell is going on here?" I demanded. Behind me, Alex made a disgruntled noise, but wisely stayed silent. Ethan guided me a few steps away and spoke lowly. Apparently Zoe's mother represented Jenna's ex in a nasty divorce, like ripping him off for millions level nasty. His mouth flattened grimly. "I assume they came here today meaning to cause trouble for her through the kids." Red-hot rage flooded my veins. The absolute nerve of Alex and his scheming girlfriend, dragging innocent children into their deranged grudges. I crossed quickly back to Lila, brushing her hair back to meet her eyes intently. "You were so brave defending your friend. I'm proud of you for standing up to bullies." Over her head, I pinned Alex and Jenna with a blistering look promising swift later retribution. Their twin glares bounced off my fury like droplets of rain. Just then the door banged open, admitting a harried woman I recognized as Zoe's mother. Her shocked gaze bounced between our tense tableau, and Lila tucked protectively under my arm. "Mrs. Quinn." Ethan swiftly intercepted her, laying on his polished CEO charm. "Let's step into the hall to discuss the incident from a legal perspective." He put a hand on her back, smoothly guiding her out. Through the window, I watched him work his magic, doubtlessly summarizing events in a light most favorable towards the girls. I focused back on my daughter, letting Ethan handle diffusing the situation his way. My priority stood cradled here in my arms. The rest could come later. "Let's get you home, baby girl." I lifted Lila's chin gently. "I think we've all had enough drama for one day." Her answering, watery smile and tight hug soothed my raging heart. As we left the tense office behind, I sent up a silent prayer of thanks for Ethan. Yet again he'd raced to our rescue like a dark knight in his sleek black car. And I'd never felt more secure knowing together we could conquer any monsters who dared threaten our peace. The tense silence stretched between us in the aftermath of my furious tirade. Ethan leaned back against the couch, jaw tight as he processed my barrage of bitter revelations. At last, the toxic flood tide of secrets from my past unleashed, I felt hollowed out physically and emotionally. Ethan dragged a hand over his face warily. "Jesus, Mir, I'm so sorry you and Lila have shouldered this toxicity alone for so long. That level of obsessive harassment." He shook his head, lines of anger bracketing his mouth. "Why the hell haven't you involved the authorities before now?" I closed my eyes against the rush of old shame. At first, I just kept hoping if I put my head down and focused on being a good mom, eventually Alex would lose interest when he didn't get a rise out of me. I exhaled shakily. But lately it feels like the floodgates opened. Like now that I'm actually happy again, he's snapped. Ethan reached over and squeezed my hand gently. "This cycle of violence stops now, Meredith. No more handling this alone. I'm calling my private security team and a lawyer first thing tomorrow. Then I want to sit down with Lila and explain gently why she won't see her father unsupervised anymore. His eyes tightened with suppressed fury. Whatever it takes, I won't let that volatile bastard near either of you again. Overwhelmed with relief at finally setting down my exhaustive burden, I leaned into Ethan's strength literally and figuratively. Just feeling his solid chest under my cheek unleashed a fresh wave of tears, only this time, cathartic ones. I wept for the naive girl who once loved Alex unguardedly, for the battered woman who broke finally leaving him, for the protective mother hardened into vigilance against his campaign of cruelty. All different versions of myself rendered refugees by one man's destructive obsession. Ethan simply held me through the storm, hands gently rubbing my back. Having witnessed the traumatic genesis firsthand now, he no doubt understood this purge stood long overdue. At last I surfaced, scrubbing the heels of my hands roughly over my swollen eyes. "I'm so sorry for dumping all this ugliness into your lap, Ethan," I rasped hoarsely. "You deserve better than being saddled with another man's damage." His fingertips nudged my chin up insistently. "You have nothing to apologize for. I care about you, both of you, deeply. I'm not going anywhere." His earnest words unlocked something painfully vulnerable in my chest. Before reason could intervene, I leaned forward and pressed my lips desperately to his. Our first kiss held no artifice or sweet romantic pretense, just raw, exposed need meeting steadfast reassurance. Perfect understanding passed soul-deep between us in the charged silence after we finally broke apart. Ethan grazed my cheek lightly with his thumb. "We'll get through this fire, Meredith. Together." I covered his broad hand with my own, finally daring to hope again for the first time in years. With Ethan beside me, even Alex's sinister storm clouds seemed surmountable threats rather than looming doom. Bolstered by newfound courage, I hugged Lila close that night and made a silent, solemn vow over her sleeping form. No matter the costs, Alex would never torment my baby again. His twisted attacks ended now, one way or another. Mama Bear had awoken at last to protect and shelter her cub, and not even his savagery could stand against my ferocity for long. All his earlier tempests now seemed paltry preludes to the full hurricane fury I would rain down if Alex dared menace my daughter further. For Lila's sake and mine both, the reckoning had arrived, and not even hell itself held an agony sufficient for unleashing on that miserable man, should he push me too far. I stirred my morning coffee absently, still mentally spinning over the latest unthinkable stunt from Alex. Luring Lila out of school illegally to take her for ice cream without my permission counted as kidnapping in my book, never mind his pathetic arguments about just wanting father-daughter bonding time. My phone buzzed with an incoming call, jolting me from vengeful fantasies of sixing Ethan's security squad on my deranged ex. Speak of the devil, I smiled instinctively, just seeing Ethan's handsome face flash on my screen. "Please tell me you have good news on the Alex front," I answered without preamble. "Even better." Ethan's smooth voice held a smile. "I come bearing gifts of gourmet cupcakes and moral support. Buzz me up?" I glanced down at my faded college sweatshirt and messy topknot. Not exactly hostess chic, but then again Ethan had seen me far more haggard lately. "You're a lifesaver," I sighed, pressing the door release. Moments later I ushered him inside, unable to resist going up on tiptoes to steal a quick kiss. Ever since that emotionally charged evening when our relationship shifted into romantic territory, I couldn't get enough of Ethan's steadying presence. He held up a box from my favorite bakery, looking unfairly gorgeous, with his slightly rumpled hair and open collar exposing a tantalizing V of skin. "Couldn't have you facing the lawyer on an empty stomach," he winked. I grinned despite my endless Alex-induced headaches. God bless this man. Over lavish red velvet cupcakes, Ethan outlined the injunction paperwork barring Alex from contacting either Lila or me outside official supervised visitation. And if he violates these court orders even once, he'll not only face contempt charges, but also trigger an automatic restraining order. Ethan looked immensely satisfied delivering this news. I could have cried in relief knowing the legal avenues now protected us while the bigger investigation into Alex's shady practices unfolded. Turns out even wealthy corporate executives had limits to flouting the rules under Ethan's watchful eye. Stuffed on cream cheese frosting and justice, I relaxed back with a contented sigh. Hopefully Alex finally realizes he's not exempt from facing consequences. Here's hoping. Ethan stacked our empty plates. Unfortunately, when it comes to ruthless narcissists like your ex-husband, the hard lesson usually requires hammering home a few times. His expression turned serious. I know you're not scared easily, Meredith, but please promise you'll let my security team handle any direct interactions if Alex approaches you or Lila again. My instinctive, stubborn independence bristled slightly at the protective decree, but the earnest love shining in Ethan's eyes wore my reluctance down. I knew his directive came from caring deeply rather than any deliberately heavy-handed male posturing. I lifted our joined hands and brushed a soft kiss over Ethan's knuckles. I promise, babe, no more stubbornly trying to tackle everything solo. His shoulders relaxed, tension easing from his frame. Our sweet moment got interrupted by Lila bounding through the door, fresh from school, full of chatter about her day. As we listened indulgently to her winding stories, I felt my heart settle into calm, steady rhythm for the first time in forever. The trials of my past with Alex seemed now muted nightmares compared to this luminous present with Ethan and Lila. I'd been running so hard towards imaginary futures before. I missed recognizing the only dreams worth chasing sat right here under this roof, filled with laughter and light. No matter what storms still brewed on the horizon, together we'd shine brightly enough to weather even Alex's bitterest gale forces. This right here already felt like home, the safe harbor I'd fought so desperately to reach through so many dark and frightening nights. At long last, we'd found our way home.